For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Thabi Madiba, researcher and analyst. Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss expropriation without compensation. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Do you think South Africa does not have a plan to address the land reform, and what will land expropriation mean for South Africans?
Well, the fact that they spent 24 years and there were not huge numbers of land claims that have not been resolved and a very small number of claims that have been addressed seems to indicate they don't have a plan. The budget has been reduced. Expropriation, in my view, also needs a plan. It's not in itself a plan. It's just one way of acquiring land. But when you acquire land and to whom do you give it? Because there are a number of different types of claimants. Which claimants deserve to get land? What is the plan with that? How do you support the people who get land? What type of training, if they need training? What type of implements or other aspects of productive tools will you be giving? How will you give it to them? So it seems to me the announcement about expropriation, which in any case is allowed under the Constitution, under certain conditions, it's not clear that it is a plan, and there's no reason why they needed this. Do they have other criteria besides those in the Constitution? That's not clear.
And last week, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa shocked many when he announced that the ANC could push for the amendment of the Constitution to allow for land expropriation without compensation. He announced this amid public hearings into the matter. So do you think this is a political proxy to gain traction ahead of the 2019 general elections?
Well, first of all, he didn't need to change the Constitution to have expropriation. The Constitution already allows expropriation under certain conditions. When he did this, he undermined what credibility the hearings had by showing that the ANC did not care what emerged out of the committee going into listening to the hearings, and he bypassed it. It may have something to do with the elections, probably it does, because at the moment all parties, not just the ANC, all parties are in a certain element of confusion. ANC is losing investor confidence. People are being ground down by poverty, by unemployment, by high price rises, all of these things. Perhaps it was seen, the overwhelming people who gave evidence to these hearings, it would appear, want expropriation without compensation. But I think Ruth Hall said it on Twitter, but people have other questions as well, and those questions were not addressed, and this is why some people call it populist. But I understand by populist is not the same as popular. It means you take a popular demand, but it is populist because you do not have a plan or a program for implementing it.
And what is the position and role of traditional leaders in constructing a systematic approach towards resolving the issue of land expropriation?
Traditional leaders are not supposed to own the land of communities. They are there in order to, as sort of custodians who are supposed to manage processes for the welfare. They're trustees, in a sense, of their community. They're not allowed to enter into mining deals with that land. It's not their land. So what role they will play ought to be in conformity with the Constitution and in conformity with the democratic rights of the people of the communities from which they come. All too often, that is not happening, and is rather worrying that the President and the ANC in general have been very deferential towards the King in regard to the Ingonyama Trust and towards traditional leaders in general. And I think it's important that those people who do respect traditional leaders, that we understand and we respect their allegiance. At the same time, kings and chiefs are not outside the constitution.
So are these traditional leaders in support or against the land expropriation without compensation?
I don't know. Some of them may be, because the EFF have been meeting with King Goodwill. How they understand it may be different from the way other people understand, the ANC understands. I don't know.
And lastly, do you think South Africa can successfully succeed in expropriating land without compensation?
Well, you know, to me, that's not the question I would ask. Can South Africa succeed in a land reform program which focuses on just one issue, expropriation without compensation? It's important that you have a comprehensive, holistic approach to land questions, to questions of identity attached to the land, to questions of the different types of claimants, people without land, people who are tenants on land, people who are workers on land, traditional leaders, a number of other people. So these people all have different needs. You can't just throw this phrase, expropriation without compensation, as if it were a solution. Even if one saw that as a primary element, it requires a plan to implement it, and they haven't come up with that as yet.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about expropriation without compensation.